All right, welcome back. We're here again with part two with my interview with the illustrious Shelley Hagen. For part one, make sure to head on over to Scott Myers' YouTube channel, Self-Storage Investing, where we got to know Shelley's background and how she started. Now we're going to kind of delve in a little bit deeper. And I kind of alluded to the fact that Shelley has a fun story that she would always tell back in the day when I was learning from her and sitting in her classes about how she was able to sell jet fuel. How did that, from real estate, from the telecom company, your beginnings, and then jet fuel? How did that all factor in?
Okay, well, that's a great question, Roel. If you would have told me when I was leaving the phone company, I'd be talking about jet fuel, gold, diamonds, and all the other stuff that's come along, I would never have believed it. But, when you get to be in your own business as an entrepreneur, when the phone rings, it's business calling, and you never quite know what it's going to be. And I really consider myself now a connector or a broker. When people call, they have a problem and they come to me because they know I have a huge network. I have people all over the world, literally, that I deal with. And so they call me because they're looking for something. And so somebody has something for sale and someone has something they want to buy, and I connect them together, and I usually make some kind of a commission, finder's fee, broker's fee, wholesale fee, whatever you want to call it. So we started out, both of us doing real estate, and I started wholesaling houses. And so I would get a house under contract and I would flip the contract to someone like yourself who's going to fix it and flip it. Maybe I didn't have time to do it or didn't have the budget that month or whatever. And so I became a mortgage broker as well because I was a hard money lender and I wanted to understand better the brokerage. Well, through my brokerage contact, I started getting commercial inquiries because of my real estate connections. And people would call me about commercial properties. And then one thing led to another. Next thing I know, I had gotten this phone call to fund some oil well development, some leases down in Tennessee. And so I was talking to the guy who happened to be somebody I knew from Ottawa that I met through real estate. And so we're working away on this thing, and as it turned out, it was kind of falling apart, and the guy who was borrowing the money was kind of going off the rails. And so at the end of the one call, his name was Mark. Mark says to me, Shelley, do you happen to know anyone who has some jet fuel for sale? And I went, jet fuel? Like, what would I have to do with jet fuel?
Right.
I'm in real estate or funding. And so he goes, yeah, they need some. And I go, okay, just a minute. So I always stick a big Post-it note in the front of my book. I have these books that I make notes, are like my Bibles. And at the very beginning of this book, I said to him, I said, let me make note of what you're looking for. And I said, you never know from one day to the next what's going to come in the door. So I wrote it down, and he goes, yeah, they need some JP54. And I went, JP54, Greek to me. I wrote it down, D2, D6, whatever he needed. And I went, okay. And I said, well, if I have anything, I'll give you a call. And I wrote down who it was and the date. So about a week or two later, whenever it was, I'm talking to a real estate agent here in Calgary, and we're trying to put together a land assembly, which is multiple acreages that were all under contract. And we were trying to assemble it all as one big development package and sell it to a builder, a developer. And all of a sudden, at the end of one of our conversations, he says to me, by the way, Shelley, do you know anyone that wants to buy some jet fuel? And I started laughing. And he goes, well, I'm being totally serious, because he didn't know me very well. And I said, I'm sorry to laugh. I said, I just had somebody about a week or two ago asking me about jet fuel, and I knew nothing about it. So I said, just a minute. So I flipped to the front of my book and I go, they need some JP54. And he goes, oh yeah, we have D6 and D2. And I go, oh good, because they need that too. So anyway, I said, okay, tell me something about this. I said, I know nothing. So he tells me what the prices were, and there's a commission and what the commission structure was. He was very good to explain the whole thing. So I phoned the guy, Mark, And I said to him, I say, hey, guess what? I found some, someone who'll sell some jet fuel. So he calls me back, and the guy had already found his supply, and he said, but I'll keep it in mind if I have anyone else. And we, over the years, him and I've, tried to do a number of different things. But then I thought to myself, well, who else do I know in my database who has something to do with jet fuel? Because I found out that a lot of it transpires in Houston or Rotterdam, because Houston, of course, is a big port and a huge tank farm there. So I started phoning people that I knew in Texas. And I phoned this little friend of mine down in Texas. His name is JC. And I said, JC, I explained why I was calling. And he goes, well, Miss Shelley, he always called me. He says, I don't have any need for it. He said, but why don't you call my good friend AC? He has a lot of these people. So he gets me, I phone this gentleman and we start talking away, really good person. He gets me in touch with this guy named JP. And by this time I'm thinking, do none of these people have real names? Just to go by their
I was
initials.
just about to ask.
And so there's like so many people that I've met that just go by their initials. It's kind of interesting. So what happened was these people kept referring me to people. And when I would start talking to them, if it's the first time I've met you, Roel, I'm going to ask you, about the jet fuel. And then I'm going to say, by the way, Roel, what else is it that you do? And lo and behold, almost every one of these people had a real estate connection. So then I started, talking about hotels in the US and commercial properties and multi-units, residential and all this kind of stuff, as well as jet fuel. And then I found out they did, financial instruments, they did gold, they did diamonds, and it just really took my whole business in a totally different direction. And
Mhm.
so I still do real estate. Right now, I've been doing some other things because real estate's been a little bit quiet here, but I anticipate it's going to get, pick up now, in 2021, we're all hoping. And there's going to be some changes, I think, in the whole global market, because people have been out of work for a long time. People are, in debt because they haven't been working, or they're only working part-time. A lot of them are on the government, programs that are out there for COVID. And I see that probably people are going to need financial assistance to help with repairing credit and debt, and also helping them with foreclosures going forward. So I think
Mhm.
I'm kind of ramping up to do that kind of stuff, because I've done a lot of foreclosure work in the past. And, I was an investor going through 2008, 2009 with the global financial crisis around the world. And Canada wrote it out really well. In Alberta, we had a hit in 2007 because of a government change in our province. But by the time 2008 came, we'd kind of come out of it and stabilized. But in the United States, they got hit very, very hard, as you know. And we
Mhm.
started buying a lot of property in the United States with joint venture partners and going through that. So we've been through it already once. And I saw, how devastating that was for people to lose their jobs, lose their homes, just terrible disruption to their family. And I don't think it's going to be as bad as 2008, 2009, but I think we're going to have a bit of a downturn because there's going to be
Mhm.
people that are in trouble. So that's kind of where
Now,
I see going on for 2021.
with that's an interesting point, because you were a full-fledged investor. You were like right in at the top of your game during the last recession, 2008, 2009, coming out of that. What repetitions of what signals are you seeing that look similar to last time? Because I was a CFP. I was a traditional straight-laced financial planner, save your way, pay down your debt, save for the long term kind of thing.
Right.
And I'm hearing a lot of interesting sentiments or commentary just in the media and then from other investors in general. And but I'm really curious to find out what do you see is happening again, and what are some of the things that are like, this is how it played out last time, so it may be something similar this time. Like, I'm sure you're comparing both crashes or both recessions, right?
Well, absolutely. And there's similarities, but there's differences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the last one was a global financial crisis that impacted everybody around the world, but it was kind of driven by Wall Street because of the way they were packaging mortgages and selling them off. And there was some misinformation to the people who had bought those mortgages, right? Pension funds, et cetera, were buying them. And so that part of the industry has changed fairly substantially because no one wants to get caught like they did back then. But you're
Right.
starting to see some similar things happening already out there. And Canada always managed that process way differently. We have very, very strict laws and regulations. I used to be on the board of a credit union, and there's things that we have checks and balances in place that just don't allow some of this stuff to happen. That happened with, the mortgages in 2008. So you're starting to see some of the same games being played
Mm-hmm.
with mortgages, but the market hasn't tanked yet because at that particular point in time in 2008, there was a lot of people that got mortgages that should never have had mortgages, right? The ninja loans, no job,
Yeah.
no income. Basically, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage. A little bit
Yeah.
different in the United States. So there's some protections there. But now we have COVID, right? There's so many people are out of work. So higher unemployment, a huge amount of people that have taken the mortgage deferral program down in the United States, but that can only go on for so long. The banks
Right.
can only go for so long where they're not getting paid, right? They have board of directors to account for. With the 2008, 2009, we lost over 300 banks in the United States
Wow.
because of the downturn with the global financial crisis. A lot of those banks never ever recovered. There were some very, very huge mortgage companies that have never ever come back. They all went bankrupt. So you're starting to see some similar things that are happening with prices in some areas are going down. Some are still really healthy, but there's just a lot of people. So it's like it's artificially being propped up right now, right? Because
I
we
see
don't
that. Yeah.
really know the true nature of exactly what the market is because everyone keeps pumping COVID money into this problem and people are floating along, trying to cover things off. But as soon as that COVID money stops, the rubber's going to hit the road and
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be people in trouble. So interest rates are good. Lending is slowing down in some areas. Markets are still fairly stable in some areas. Some areas are starting to be hit, but there's large unemployment and consumer debt is all-time highs, and people are taking those payouts. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, all of those things are like big red flags going forward, right? The
Right.
fundamentals of the market are really being impacted by this COVID payments.
And it's
It's
almost
really
like it's
not
being
letting the market be the market.
exactly, yeah. It's being tampered with. So on the one hand, there's the interest rates both in US and Canada are very low. Recently, actually, we have a few of our own properties that were listed for sale. We're just like, oh, if we're going to get a good price, then if there's other opportunistic people, we'll sell. But if not, we'll hold on to it. But there's a combination of that, the low interest rates. It seems like lenders are trying to encourage first-time home buyers. That's a lot of the inquiries we're getting, and the moratorium on the foreclosures for the lending companies. All of this stuff is like artificially, like you said, helping the economy kind of kick. It's almost like they're kicking the can down the road. But at
Right.
some point, what do you think the opportunity could be for someone who thinks differently, like yourself?
Right. So that's a good analogy. They're kicking the can down the road, but at some point in the time, that can's going to hit a rock and go in the ditch. And
Mm,
it's going to be a rough ride into the ditch, I think, in a lot of ways. Uh, I think you made a point though about the first time home buyers. And probably one of the things that's helped both Canada and the United States is the millennials, the 20, 30-year-olds in that demographic group have been late adopters of real estate. A lot of them didn't think they could ever afford real estate because the prices are so much higher than when their parents got in, right?
Good point.
But now a lot of them still have decent jobs and are still employed, and the interest rates are so low. They're now finally in their early 30s and going, well, I guess maybe we should buy a house because now it's time. So the average home buyer in most of North America is around that 32 to 34, I think, range is the last I heard, somewhere in that range. So they're kind of saving the market to some extent because those people still have jobs. But it's the people that, are outside of that don't have the jobs, that maybe have, been taking advantage of the COVID payments and stuff that are kind of propping everything up. So thank God for the millennials because
Hmm.
they've been the people that are buying. So we'll see. Where I live, we have the highest unemployment in Canada, and we've been really struggling because of the downturn in oil and gas that happened as of 2015. Really
Right.
had not recovered from that, and then we get COVID on top of that. So it's, we have kind of a double whammy. It's been keeping us down. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think the banks, if the government still wants the banks to give these mortgage deferrals, that at some point the bank's going to come to the government and say, well, I'll do this
No.
for another 6 months, but pay me some money here. I
Right.
can't go with no income, right? Or lower income. They're still getting, not all their mortgages are in mortgage deferral, but here in Canada, the United States, I think it's like 30%, somewhere in that range, that are in mortgage deferral.
Hmm.
Well, it's going to run out at some point.
So what I'm hearing, it kind of seems like if you are a flipper, your stereotypical flipper, that maybe focusing on inventory that is for this millennial generation, like smaller starter homes potentially, would be a good place.
Well, typically, especially if you're just starting out, I always recommend you get into entry level homes. And so, what you need to do is, if no matter what market you're in, you need to do some real deep research to find out what is selling. For
Hmm.
example, in my market, if it's over $800,000, it's not selling very fast. But those entry level homes that are around that, 350 to 500 are selling at a pretty good pace because who's buying those? The first time home buyers, the millennials, or they're getting into condos. And so, condo market here is tanked. We've got probably 10 to 12 months worth of inventory, and they're not stopping building those condos because in some ways it's a good time for them to be building because they can probably get labor cheaper because people have been out of work and stuff like that, and they can keep their better employees. So they're not stopping. If they had a project, they're still going ahead to keep people employed. That's really what
Hmm.
it is. But then now you've got all this inventory sitting out there and no one to buy it because
Hmm.
you need to check. The other thing is, do you have inward migration? What are the fundamentals of your market? Is there jobs? Are there people coming there to, for those jobs? What is the industry? For example, if you're in Orlando, Florida, for example, which is predominantly driven by the entertainment industry with, people coming there for a vacation to Disney World, etc. Well, not as many people are coming there anymore, right? People are afraid to travel. People are being restricted from travel. They're discouraged. Disney World is open, I believe, but with limited number of people that can go in. Disneyland is closed down completely in California. So you really need to look at and do your really good due diligence on your market. Is it even worth your while to do a fix and flip right now? Your market may not support that. It might be better to get into a rental and hold a rental. But what is your vacancy rate? Are there people there, or is it a market where people are leaving to go someplace else to find work? So you really got to do your due diligence.
Mm-hmm. So again, as the old saying goes, it depends. It depends on
It
all
depends.
a lot of these
Exactly.
factors. Huh.
Yes. And every market is so different, right? Yeah, everyone has to be looked at a little bit differently. Some of the markets in the, Midwest tend to be fairly stable because they're kind of driven by, agricultural, kind of fundamentals around their area, and large enough centers that they can kind of sustain themselves, like Kansas, etc. But you're probably not going to see huge growth in your appreciation in those
Mm-hmm.
areas, but it'll be stable. So, you need to consider those factors as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, so what kind of, say somebody is watching this and they have done a little bit of education, maybe they've got one or two rental properties under their belt. What would be kind of your, I guess, to kind of close out the interview, your advice, if lack of a better word term, in terms of how to carry themselves, in terms of the mindset or expectations? Because for me, for example, this is my first recession, but fortunately, I have been investing for nearly a decade prior to this. But yeah, what do you think is needed to get through all of this and come out on the other end profitably?
Well, that's a very good point. It is a long-term hold strategy, right? When you're getting into rentals. And when you go through a downturn, um, don't panic. If you can manage it the way it is because you have good enough rent and low enough mortgage payments that you're still making some money, ride it out, because this too will pass. At some point in time, we're going to move on to greener pastures, we'll anticipate. Excuse me. So you can't panic and throw everything in the bucket and sell everything. But if you're in trouble and you're losing money every month, you might have to do that, right? Or what can I do to change that situation? Maybe I go and refinance, because maybe your strategy has been to pay down the mortgage as soon as possible. So you've got a short amortization and high payments. Well, maybe you have to go to the bank and say, okay, I need to stretch that back out to 30 years, 25, 30 years, depending on which market you're in, and get my payment down so that I can give myself some breathing room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of markets, because the property values have gone down, the taxes are slowly starting to go down. Insurance seems to be going up because we've got a lot more break-ins. When you have a depressed economy, people are desperate to find money, and they are out doing whatever they need to do to get something, to get cash for their family. So you got to look at, and what am I doing to operate my business? Am I being the most efficient as an operator? And do I have good tenants that I want to keep? And what am I doing to keep those tenants? Not saying that you need to give away the farm, but you're going to be maybe a little more attentive because you don't want to have churn. And you might have to use incentives to keep them there depending on the vacancy rate in your area. Also, the other thing is, what is the government mandate in your province or state for rental tenants with COVID? And
Mm-hmm.
if there are some things that are happening where the state or the province is saying, oh, you can't evict them because of COVID, well, then you need to go to your bank, and maybe you need to get a mortgage deferral for 6 months on your rental property so you can put that rent into a pool and save it so you can pay off, a little bit later on, right? So
Mm-hmm.
some investors have been doing that. They went, got deferred for 3 to 6 months, kept the rent in a reserve fund, and are using that then now to manage it going forward. And
Mm-hmm.
it is always a good strategy as an investor to have a reserve fund. Every month you should be putting away a certain percentage, 5, 10% or whatever of your rent, into reserve for these kind of things, because you never know when you're going to have a vacancy or something's going to happen in the market. And it's all part of being an effective business manager,
Mm-hmm.
because you got
Now,
to
pardon
look
me,
at it
I
as
was
business.
exactly. I was actually thinking while you were going through that, the the last question actually I want to ask you is more for someone who is looking to just get started. Is
Right.
now a good time to invest, or should they wait till after all of this is done?
Well, as you said, it depends. It depends on the market or where you are. Some of the
Exactly. Yeah.
markets, it may not be a good time because if you're just starting out, you may not have the ability to ride those things out. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a good time for you to be a wholesaler
Mm-hmm.
rather than hold rentals. So now you make, work on your networking to find investors who are buying because there's people in every market that have pools of resources that they can afford to do that. So here, for example, we have such a high vacancy rate, but I have somebody that I can flip houses to. The last time I talked to him just before Christmas, he had 17 fix and flips on the go here in Calgary.
Wow.
Like, that's a lot of inventory. He buys 5 to 6 houses a month, but he has deep pockets. He has his own cash and he has several very large investors that have been part of his business for the last 10 years. They've got the ability to ride it out. You might just be starting off brand new and don't have that ability, but you want to find those people and you want to flip them deals that you know fit their criteria. You make a little bit of money and now you can put that money aside for your first deal when you can now afford to get in and buy a rental property of your own. So you might
Mm-hmm.
flip, or you might find a good fix and flip, do a couple of those kind of deals where you're getting active income, some cash, and then you buy a rental property. You do 4 or 5 other deals and then buy another rental property.
So
That
doesn't it
makes
really
sense.
depend? Yeah, it doesn't really depend more on the individual, more so than the market, because it's really when you're ready, if the individual is ready to, like, I've had it, this is it. We're on top of all this struggle with the pandemic and the economy. Even prior to that, there have been some struggling sectors, or what have you. There is a strategy. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to try to force your own strategy, like forcing a square peg into a round hole. But it kind of depends on the individual too. Like you said, wholesale might be a great low risk strategy right now. Because people have asked me also as well, is this a good time to invest? And it's such a general and vague question. I'm sure you get that all the time as
Yes.
well. But in large part, how much do you think, on the individual level, rather than out there objectively of stuff that we can't really control, what should the individual, in your opinion, be working on in terms of themselves, preparing themselves?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was just talking to about, knowing the market and doing your own assessment of the market and figuring out you need to do a self assessment. First
Mm-hmm.
of all, financially, where am I at? Do I have the ability to put down some down payment and buy a house? Can I get financing? Do I have good enough credit? Do I have enough? Is it a good time to buy rental properties in my market? And what is my skill set as well? What is my network? Because already everybody has a network, whether you realize it
Yeah.
or not, right? Everybody knows people. And because I
Mm-hmm.
know you, I know all of your people, right? So if I don't know somebody who can, you know, be a plumber, I could phone you and go, Roel, do you happen to have a plumber? And so now by meeting you, I've expanded my network exponentially. So I need to look at myself and have a good hard look at yourself. Because when you get into business, you learn a lot about yourself, right? And what are my skill sets? What do I like to do? You might think I need to do a fix and flip because all the TV shows on home and garden TV show people buying fixer uppers, but I'm not a handy kind of person. I don't have the skills and abilities to paint a house or never done those kind of things. So that wouldn't be something I'd recommend you go and do. So
Mm-hmm.
look at yourself, look at the market. What do you need in your pocket and how can you get it? And if you don't have the ability to get credit and financing, there's plenty of ways to make money in real estate. Wholesale, is one of them. Joint venture partners, etc. You might know a ton of people who have money and credit that can help you buy something. You split the deal with them and because they're helping you get into your first deal. So there's multiple things to look at. Who are you and what can you do? And again, taking action and believing that you can do it, because this business is really all about mindset and action, right? I got to believe that I can do it. I get out there and focus on it, but I do something about it, because I can
Right.
take all the training in the world from all, Coach Roel, Coach Shelley, but if I don't do anything with it, then I'm never going to be successful.
Right. Right. Now, there really is no perfect time. It's, you've got to decide when the perfect time is, and you can create that, right?
Absolutely. It's whatever's perfect time for you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always ways to make money in the market. And the skills that you make in that you develop in real estate are transferable to lots of different businesses as well.
Mm-hmm.
I had a mentor student that got into real estate investing and coached and mentored them on that. And then a couple of years later, all of a sudden he's brokering cars and loving it. And he still had some rental properties, but his passion wasn't the real estate. It was all about the cars. So what is, again, that's who are you and what is it that you bring to the table for skills and abilities, and what are you really passionate about?
Mm-hmm. Now, just in case people, I get inundated with inquiries. How do I get in touch with that amazing Shelley girl that you had on here? What
Oh,
would be an appropriate way for people to learn more about you? Something I can put in the description of the.
so I'll provide you with my bio so you can put that on your website. I can be reached through, Shelley Hagen, through Facebook, shelleyhagen.com. As my email is shelley@shelleyhagen.com. It goes to my real estate investing website, and you can contact me there through Facebook or through that email, shelley@shelleyhagen.com. And yeah, I mean, if anyone, I always love talking about real estate and business, at any point in time, whatever, anytime, just get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shelley. It's been a pleasure catching up with you and having a bit more of a tangible conversation with you. I hope you stay healthy out there as well. And once everything opens up, I'll visit you in Calgary once again. And if you're in Orlando, definitely let me know ahead of time too.
Absolutely. I look forward to an opportunity to get together. And if I come to Orlando with you and your family, hopefully after all this craziness is done and we can all, feel safe, traveling and stuff again. I look forward to it. And thank you so much for inviting me to come on to your podcast. And, it was just wonderful to see you again and to chat. And I hope somebody, picked up a few little tidbits of information that can help them with their business, because it's all about how can we help each other. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
So once again, thanks a lot, Shelley, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Roel. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye for now.
Bye.